All right. Every creative deal lives or dies on one thing: trust. Listen, forget scripts and calculators and contract templates. If the seller doesn't believe that you can solve their problem, your deal's dead before it even begins. That's why today's guest, he doesn't lead with numbers, he leads with relationships. Wes Thompson's not some overnight wholesalers chasing fast flips. He's a creative deal master who closes sub-2 and seller finance deals because the sellers feel one thing: safe. And now he is leveling up and taking some of that same trust-based approach into bigger, more complex commercial real estate plays. In a market where most investors are burning bridges trying to close fast, Wes is out there closing slow but stacking deals because people believe in him and his process. So if you're serious about sub-2, creative finance, or scaling into larger deals without burning your network, this is the episode for you. Welcome to the Closers Club, where real investors come to build trust, close creatively, and play the long game. Wes, welcome. Everybody's out there talking about creative financing like it's a strategy and trying to shoehorn it into every single deal. But in the real world, none of it really works unless like the seller trusts you. So let's start right there. When you're walking into a deal where maybe the seller's behind on payments, or they're overwhelmed, or they just don't trust investors because maybe they've been burned, what do you say or do to really just shift that energy and start building that trust fast?
Sure, David. I would say that the two most important things are providing hope and
Hmm.
certainty
Okay.
to that seller. And what I mean by that is providing them the hope that they're going to come out on the back end of the deal better than the situation there is right now,
Love
and the
it.
certainty that you're able to get it done.
Hmm.
Like you said, I'm not a wholesaler. I'm not out there looking to sign contracts and assign contracts or anything like that. I am
Yeah.
a buy and hold investor. So anything that I'm doing, I'm putting my name, my credibility, and my relationships on the line. So
Right.
whether it's doing a deal with a wholesaler, direct with a seller, or even with an agent, on an on-market deal, being able to provide everybody involved with the hope and the certainty that you can get
Mhm.
that deal done, those I
Yeah.
say are the two most important things.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, I think we're in the trust economy. People have to know, like, and trust you, right? So they know you,
Mhm.
they like you built some kind of rapport, but they have to trust that you can solve their problem because as investors, first off, our job is to help people. Really, that's what it is. That's why we all have these particular set of skills. But yeah, we go out there and we search for people with death, divorce, back taxes, bad tenants, job transfer, all of these problems. And these are things that are literally keeping people up at night. Right. So, in order for us to do the deal and actually see it to completion, because I think there are a lot of people that can kind of bamboozle a seller into signing something, but then afterwards they're like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't even know if this guy can solve my problem. They have to believe that, right? And you should be, legitimately trying to help them unless you're a psychopath.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I do really believe that's important. So I'm glad that we're talking about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in the real estate business, as many years as you have, I'm sure you've come across the old saying, "Hut up or shut up,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I've been on
I
some
think it goes.
podcasts where I had to send. They wanted all the HUDs. I'm like, okay, man, it's gonna take me a little bit, but we sent him like just pages and pages and files of stuff. He's like, okay, I get it. We're good.
Okay, yeah, and I think that goes a long way. So all of the deals
Yeah.
that I do, one of the things that I always ask the sellers to be for me in the future is a referral, to where I say,
Mm,
hey, if I'm doing another sub-2 or I'm doing a seller finance deal,
love that.
whether it's the agents involved, the sellers involved, the wholesalers involved, say, hey, in the future, if I'm working another deal that's very similar to this one, and
Love
they
that.
want contacts or they want referrals to say, hey, is this guy legitimate? Does he
Mhm.
perform the way that he says he does? Will
Mm,
you be willing to be that for me? And it's something I always get in writing along with contact information as part of the closing packet.
I love
um,
that. That's brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so that especially in the Chattanooga area,
Mhm.
I'm starting to talk more with agents for on-market deals for
Mhm.
Sub2,
Mhm.
and I always lead with, I can send HUDs, I can send referrals with agents who I've closed deals with, who
Mm.
will attest to, yes, he actually lives up to
Oh,
what
that's
he
great.
says he's going to do, and he's not a wholesaler, he doesn't assign contracts or anything
Right.
like that. And so leveraging other people's relationships and their credibility, I'm kind of getting to the point I don't even call agents anymore. I just have agents who I've done deals with call them because they come with, credibility and bona fides that I don't,
Mhm.
just as an investor.
I love that. I never thought about getting referrals or just kind of testimonials, referral video, even a video from an agent. That would be fantastic to put on a page. But yeah, I've got a friend in another area, and they are amazing at showing up at every closing. They wholesale, they rehab, they rent, they do all that stuff. But every property they buy, they literally show up and have somebody film and get a little referral video. So I think that's so important, because that helps build the trust the next time. Like, this guy actually does the thing that he's saying he's going to do. That's so crucial.
Right. And I think especially as an end buyer, that goes a long way,
Mhm.
especially when you're doing creative deals. And
Right.
I understand why a lot of wholesalers won't do creative deals and won't wholesale
Mhm.
creative deals, because if something goes awry, who's the
Yeah.
first person the seller is going to call? The wholesaler.
100%.
So yeah, 100%. So I understand that, from a wholesale standpoint, and I can
Mhm.
see creative finance deals, wholesaling those being a lot more risky. So that's why
I
I
agree.
prefer to just be an end buyer, be an
Mhm.
investor,
Yeah.
and just keep my integrity and my sanity intact.
Man, I agree, and we're all in a lot of communities where people do wholesale them, and I've bought Sub2 deals on wholesale. In fact, I'm looking for some right now, so find me some good ones in Chattanooga. But yeah, when I sit down with Mrs. Smith and we're belly to belly, or whatever it is, and I'm in her living room, like, I'm the person that's going to solve those things. So I do get nervous about assigning them, because this has happened to me in the past, where I thought I had really reliable people that had money, but the first time they hit a snag, it's Mrs. Smith's mortgage they're not paying. They're going to keep paying their credit cards. And I'm not saying that's all the time, but when Mrs. Smith gets that call from the mortgage company, it's me she's coming to, even though I'm already out of the deal. So I think you just have to be careful if you're going to assign those, for sure.
Well, and from a wholesale standpoint, if you are going to assign those, I think it's one
Hmm.
thing to put them out on all the websites and Investor
Hmm.
Lift and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And you're going to get a lot of tire kickers. You're going to
Hmm.
get people who are going to buy the deal, but hey, it's great, they're bringing cash, but you don't know a whole lot about them. You don't know a whole
Right.
lot about their business.
Hmm.
So I can see from a wholesale standpoint, like, just trying to stay away, from that. But you being a wholesaler, if I'm someone who's bought multiple properties from you
Sure.
and performs every single time, who's going to be the first person that gets the call on the next opportunity?
Everyone, for sure. And even to go back to what you said too, for me, when we were actively wholesaling and just blowing it up, when I got a Sub2 deal, man, I wanted to keep it. And this is something I don't think enough wholesalers do, is you should be keeping some of these deals. So for me, like, if I did this creative deal, like, I marketed it, I made the deal, I negotiated it, and I get it. We all need money sometimes. I've wholesale deals that I wish I hadn't, now looking back in over 22 years. But like, keep some of those, because that's where you really do build that long-term wealth. And those Sub2 deals make just almost always make really great rentals. If you could wholesale it, you could certainly keep it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was great in the last 3-4 years when you were getting sub twos that were at
Mhm.
that 3 to 4% interest
Sure.
rate. But
Yeah.
now when you're talking, most of the ones you're seeing now are 5.5 to
Right.
7,
Which
right?
still is cheap,
It's
man. I've
yeah.
been around long enough. I remember when I got a 7% loan in '08, and I thought I was the fucking man. So, I think 7.7 is the 50-year average on mortgages.
Yeah.
So we're still in good shape, but I do think interest rates are gonna drop again next year.
I think that even sub two deals as a homestead buyer
Yeah.
is a wonderful opportunity to
Mhm.
where it's just,
I
oh, I
agree.
can get into a home for maybe a little bit of money up front and I don't have to deal with the bank or go get a new loan or anything like that.
Right.
That's absolutely perfect. And especially for somebody who is, facing pre-foreclosure, right?
Sure.
Now you're helping them build their credit back
Mhm.
up on a sub two deal. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of positives all the way around with them. And
Mhm.
I absolutely love it as a strategy, both for buying and selling.
Yeah, I don't think, and this is something that I do see across, all of the social medias. I do think there are some people that try to shoehorn it into every deal, and I think it has a very specific place.
Absolutely.
Somebody that just, for me, I've never put a lot of money down on sub twos, but I do want something that's in relatively good shape, unless I'm going to rehab it and turn it right around.
Mhm.
Because I'm taking on that risk, and I'm taking on the mortgage, and I'm taking all those things. I want to be in it for 5, max 10 grand. I want it to be, paint and carpet. That's just the way that I do it. But I see people putting some big money down, and maybe, I guess, if they're going to flip it quick, then it works. But when you're talking to sellers, I know a lot of new investors, they rush to the pitch, right? And they want to start using all these fancy words and Sub2, and I'm going to take over your payments, and put in Intravisio trust and all this weird stuff. How do you balance like educating the seller without overwhelming them? Because you can give them so much information, they'll just ball up in the fetal position.
Yeah, one of the things the big sayings that I've learned over the past few years getting into creative finance is that an overwhelmed mind says no.
Sure.
And so you almost have to convince the seller to sell themselves on that sort of deal structure. And, from a whole kind of looking at it from a wholesaler perspective, that when you're talking to the seller, most wholesalers are always going to be looking for that cash deal. But going into it, hey, this is not going to be a good cash deal. There's not enough equity. And then really it just comes down to, what is the seller's story? What is it they're trying to accomplish? And then, along that line of saying, oh, well, if I sell this on the market, I might have to pay money to get rid of it. I can't, hey, I can't sell this as a cash deal because there's not enough equity in it. Like, oh, I wonder if there's some other type of structure. Say, oh, well, what if somebody just took over the payments on your loan and you could just walk away from that? Would that help?
Yeah.
I was out in Arizona last week with Pace's team, and he called a seller that somebody there had on the line about an opportunity right outside of Joshua Tree. And they got on the phone, and Pace essentially said, okay, this is what you're asking for. This is what you owe on it. It's been vacant for 5 months. You're making the mortgage payments, and you can't afford to continue doing that too much longer. And he was like, why don't we just take over the payments on it? Not explaining Sub2, not explaining how it works, just saying, hey, what if somebody else just made your loan payment? Is that acceptable? And he was like, yeah, I would be okay with that. Okay, great. We'll get another call on the next day and figure it out, right? You don't have to make it complicated.
No, I agree with you. I think some people, they get nervous and it's just like verbal diarrhea. Just they come out and they try to either over explain or show how smart they are. And you're just, a confused mind says no. I 100%, I agree with you. It can be
and when you go to explain it, right, it can get overwhelming very quickly, especially when they start talking the ins and outs of what happens if it doesn't get paid, what happens if this, what happens if that, right? And you kind of want to steer the conversation away from answering those questions more to just at just a very basic level, like, hey, is this something you would be interested in? Is this something that solves the current problem that you're facing? And if the answer is yes, then over the next day or two, we can formulate those questions, provide those answers so that you're not overwhelming them all at once, because they're already overwhelmed. They're facing a problem. They're already stressed out. And, it's our job not to add to that stress.
Yeah. Have there ever been a time where, maybe they would have said yes, but you've pulled away from the deal because just didn't feel right, or you didn't feel like that relationship was going to be there? You just thought maybe this is going to be a problem down the road. Maybe they don't 100% understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I've actually had 2 of those, and it wasn't so much that they didn't understand what was going on because they were facing pain points and they just wanted out of it. It was more they didn't understand why I didn't want to move forward, and for me, it was mainly just a numbers game. So there was a property that I bought 0% seller financed up in McDonald, Tennessee about 1.5 years ago. And the wholesaler that I bought the deal from, he became an agent there in the local Chattanooga, Cleveland area. And over this past year, he sent me, I think, 3 Sub2 deals where he had clients who reached out to him. He looked at it and said, hey, if we put this on the MLS, you're going to lose money on it. But I know a guy who will just come in and take over payments. And this is what he does, you know? And for me, it was just a numbers game. There was too much rehab work. The rental market wouldn't sustain, the returns that really I needed to get into it. So I had to walk away from them, which I hate having to do, because where are you going to get, future opportunities like that? But when you break down the numbers, still, even creative finance, it doesn't work every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people right out. I love that when you talked about earlier, you make them pick you. I'll tell them, hey, why don't you list it with a realtor? Because it's not the first time they've ever thought of that, right? Oh, well, I don't want to do this, this, and this. Okay. Well, man, Wes, if you were my brother, I would just tell you to rent this thing. Oh, I don't want to deal with tenants. Have you thought about just fixing it up? I don't have the money to fix it up. Like literally, we're walking down a hallway and they are closing all the doors until I am the only option that's left.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Sub2, I've told people, hey, Man, I have a lot of people ask me to do this. Honestly, I probably take 1 out of 10 because I just want to be really sure that, we can make this work and that we're really committing to this deal. And honestly, by the time I pay you and I pay for closing and I pay for all the repairs, I may have more in this deal than you do. And,
Mhm.
we're going to make sure that, we make this payment every single month for you. So I want them always, I want them to feel comfortable that that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of going back to the relationship part of that, especially when you're working on market deals, having
Mhm.
agents who, exactly like you said, know, like, and trust you, who you've done
Yeah.
deals with, whether they're cash or creative deals, having
Mhm.
them in your corner can really go a long way.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, for
I
sure.
had an agent there in Chattanooga. She helped me buy my very first property creatively. It was a sub 2 deal. And
Nice.
essentially, all I paid was agent commissions and closing costs, and
Love
I
that.
owned the property. And then this past
Gosh.
year, she had a listing for a duplex in Chattanooga. I looked up the owner of it. I know the owner. She knows the owner because it's a guy who's done GC work for both of us.
Oh,
She
really?
actually referred me to him in the local area, and he was going through a divorce. And he had this
Mhm.
duplex that was in his wife's name, and they just wanted the property gone. So we worked out a deal for a sub 2 seller finance hybrid, where I was just going to take over the payments on the loan, and then I was going to make them payments on the equity.
Nice.
And the realtor and I were talking about, hey, why don't we partner on this property, together? And
Mhm.
then we had the conversation of, is this a one-off thing, or are we trying to start a business together? And I knew she was looking for another rental in the area. And so I told her, I said,
Yeah.
Gina, why don't you just buy it?
Yeah.
And I was like, buy it on the deal framework that we've already worked out. So she bought it for just closing costs because she didn't have
Oh,
to pay
wow.
herself a commission. So
Nice.
now she calls me at least once a week, like, hey,
Really.
I got this thing. Can you help out with it? Right. And
Mhm.
that, having those relationships, both personal and business in
Mhm.
real estate, can just take you to places that you can only dream of.
I tell you, I love that, and that's what being a go-giver is. And guys, we'll flash this up here, but if you have not read that book, it's absolutely amazing. And yeah, there are going to be times where you can't do the deal, but help people. Again, this is why we're here as investors. Like, who can we push them to, right? Maybe I can't close this sub 2 deal, but I'll push it over to Wes, or he's got a wholesale deal and he can push it over to me. But again, do the right thing. We're here to help people because they are losing sleep over these deals every single night. So I love that. That's a great way to do business.
Yeah, and I love how you have easy REI dispo set up. I think I've probably sent 3 wholesalers over to you just within the last
Nice.
week, who I was like, okay, I can tell you're new. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not a buyer for this, but if you need
Mhm.
one, reach out to these folks because they have
Yeah.
nationwide buyers and they know what they're doing. So,
Appreciate that. Yeah, we'll look at
yeah,
the deal and tell you, hey, do you need to adjust it? Is it good? Do you need more time, a little bit lower, whatever it is. So I appreciate that. But let's talk about this because I know this wasn't in, probably what you wanted to talk about, but you're like expanding into a lot of bigger deals. So let's talk about that. Your transition from like these smaller single family or duplexes into talk about just real quick some of the new bigger stuff that you're doing. It's
sure.
exciting.
So I wasn't really looking to get into bigger stuff. It just kind of
Yeah.
happened on its own.
Mhm.
Several months ago, I started working with a family office that was focusing on industrial outdoor storage
Whoa.
opportunities
Okay.
around metro areas. And the acquisitions director, he and I were talking. And I told him, that I own several properties in Chattanooga, and I have a lot of friends and family there. So he said, "Great, reach out to them, start looking in Chattanooga because that'll be a big market for us."
Yeah.
So I reached out to my residential agents who I've done deals with and said, hey, who is the person to know in Chattanooga when it comes to commercial real estate? And they all said
Mhm.
the exact same person. So I
Okay.
said, all right, I'm going to call that guy. I'm going to talk to him, start forming a relationship with him.
Love it.
So um, prior to me meeting him, I had witnessed a student housing opportunity in Chattanooga on
Mhm.
Crexy. It was one of his listings.
Mhm.
And I think it was a $3 million deal at the time. And I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool and
Nice.
awesome. But just put it in the back of my mind. And then later on met Joe. Joe and I had a lot of conversations talking about different real estate opportunities. And I had called him about another property in Chattanooga that I was looking at
Yeah.
for
I know exactly
co-living.
who
It's
you mean.
essentially, yeah, you know, hey, this is the I reached out to him and said, hey, would this be a good option for co-living or rent by the room? And
Mhm.
he said, no, this one. He's like, but I had this property on the market earlier this year, that it's exactly what you were looking for. Let me call the seller and see if they're still
Mhm.
interested in selling. So
Mhm.
he called, and they were still interested in selling, and they were willing to let it go for 2.5 million. It's a 24 bedroom property just off of campus. that's currently on a triple net lease to a nonprofit that works with the students. Essentially they have a faith-based program that runs out of the property, and all the students who live on the property are part of the program. So I said, okay, great. Let me take a look at this. And then, we recently had the Creative Nation tour meet up in Chattanooga with Pace Morby. I flew out there from DC to co-host it. And Joe set me up directly with the owner and the property manager and the appraiser who had done the appraisal on it in 2021, and just put everything together. And still to this day, I have not met Joe, but we talk on the phone at least 3 times a week about different things. So Pace and I went to tour the property. We checked it out. And then I was talking to the owner, and learning more about what it is that he's facing in life and what he has coming up. He's a developer. He owns several businesses in the area. And he said, this has been a passion project for me for the last decade, but I'm not married to it. And I need my time and focus elsewhere with all the development coming into Chattanooga.
So much.
So I said, okay, great. Yeah. So we started talking about just the current debt that's on it. And the property manager and I were talking about what we could do it. And the seller, the owner, he said, well, I do a lot of business with my bank, and because they make a lot of money off of me and all my businesses, they give me very good terms on loans. And he said, so he owed, it was about 1.35 million on the property. And it was at like a 5.5% rate.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay. I said, well, if it appraises high enough, I could go and get a new loan, probably for, the full 2.5 million, use a transactional lender to cover the rest. Then they get, their money refunded post-closing. Sure. And, I'd be into the property for $0. I said, the issue with it though, is that once I start factoring in the expenses, because there's talk about the nonprofit moving out of there, I was like, based off the figures I've been provided, it's not going to cash flow. I was like, and I can't be into a $2.5 million property that doesn't cash flow significantly, especially one that size. Yeah. Bad idea. And so he and I were talking about it, and he said, well, I think interest rates are going to come down. They'll have another drop once, maybe twice within the next year. He said, my commercial loan matures on it next year. So he looked at me. I didn't even say this. He said, why don't I just go cash out, refinance it at a lower rate or the same rate, and then you just take over the debt. So I was like, so I get to leverage your credit, your relationships, all that. And I said, okay, we could do that, but it still doesn't solve the cash flow problem.
Right.
And so the manager of the nonprofit was there as well. And he was like, well, because it's 2 buildings, on the same property. And he said, well, what if we move the programming over to the smaller building, and then we can place our program members in the big building, whatever rooms we don't use, you could just lease those out to other students, or because it's approved for short-term rentals. So we could do travel, we could do Airbnb, we could just do straight student housing, whatever we wanted to do with it. And the property manager and I looked at numbers. We're like, yeah, it would definitely, cash flow then. So now we're talking about a creative deal for multi-million dollars that I'm going to potentially be into for no money out of pocket, and cash flowing several $1,000s a month, just because I showed up and had a conversation with the seller and listened to his problems. And that was it.
Again, relationships are what get deals done. I've done that. I bought countless packages here in town, and it's just sitting there with people and letting them know that you're a real person, and that, whatever their issue is, right? And I've had a couple that were in like stage 4 cancer, and they just wanted to make sure somebody, their widow eventually was going to make get those payments every single month. So important. Wes, thank you so much. Where can people find you, man? Where can they follow all the crazy deals that you've got going on, and maybe reach out to you and either get some advice or maybe partner with you?
Sure. The best place to follow my journey and reach out to me is on Instagram at its_Wes Thompson. Instagram is definitely the best way to go. I do have Facebook, but I keep that locked down mainly for friends and family and stuff like that. Or they can find me on LinkedIn too, Wes Thompson.
Oh, really?
I'm on there. I don't leverage LinkedIn too much. That's more of a W2 professional thing, but Instagram seems to be where it's at.
I love it. Wes, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully when you're coming back to Chattanooga, I want you to come by the office and hang out. And I know you were in and out so quick a couple weeks ago.
I'll be there the week after next.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll be here. I don't
Christmas. I'll be in town.
Cool. Hit me up, man. I don't think I'm not going to Phoenix until middle of next month. So I'd love to connect with you and go grab some dinner or something.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, David.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.